Silence fell over the classroom. 27 pairs of eyes darted between the impossible equation sprawled across the whiteboard and the small Filipino boy standing alone at the front of the room. The air seemed to thicken with each passing second as Mr. Gregory Talbot's voice sliced through the tension. "Solve this equation, Micah, and my entire salary is yours. That's $85,000. More than your family's ever seen." The words hung in the air like a poisoned cloud. No one moved. No one breathed. For a moment, time itself seemed suspended in that classroom at Roosevelt Middle School. But what happened next would change everything. Not just for Micah Reyes, but for every person in that room, for the school, and eventually for thousands of students across the country who would hear this story. This is how one moment of cruelty became the catalyst for something extraordinary. Micah Reyes had perfected the art of being invisible. At 12 years old, he'd mastered the ability to blend into backgrounds, to speak only when spoken to, and to move through the hallways of Roosevelt Middle School like a shadow, present but unseen. It wasn't that he was shy, exactly. It was strategy. "Remember," his father had told him on his first day of American school 3 years ago, "sometimes the smartest thing to do is to keep your smartness hidden." Joaquin Reyes, a Filipino aerospace engineer who had brought his family to Portland after securing a position at a prestigious research facility, knew what it meant to be underestimated. His wife, Isabel, a former mathematics professor at the University of Manila, had nodded in agreement, though Micah had seen the conflicted look in her eyes. Now, as Micah walked into Mr. Talbot's advanced mathematics class on a warm September morning, he felt the familiar weight of his parents' contradictory advice: be exceptional but don't stand out. The classroom smelled of chalk dust and floor cleaner. Micah slid into his seat in the back corner by the window, where a shaft of morning sunlight illuminated the tiny dust particles floating in the air. He pulled out his notebook, a simple spiral-bound one, not the leather-embossed journal his mother had tried to gift him, and waited for class to begin. "Micah," the cheerful voice belonged to Carlos Rivera, the only person at Roosevelt who seemed determined to prevent Micah's invisibility. "Did you see the new NASA photos? The ones from the Jupiter mission?" Micah felt a small smile form despite himself. "Yeah, the atmospheric storms were incredible." Carlos dropped into the seat beside him, his enthusiasm radiating like heat. "I stayed up until midnight looking at them. My mom got so mad." He lowered his voice. "Worth it, though." From 2 rows ahead, Emily Zhang turned around, her perfectly straight ponytail swinging. "You guys talking about Jupiter? The colors in those photos were unreal." This was Micah's small circle. Carlos, with his boundless enthusiasm for all things space-related, and Emily, whose academic perfectionism was matched only by her sense of justice. They were the reason school was bearable, even on days when Mr. Talbot was teaching. The classroom door opened with a bang that made everyone jump. Gregory Talbot strode in, his tall frame casting a long shadow down the center aisle. He didn't look at the students as he placed his leather briefcase on the desk with deliberate precision. "Pop quiz," he announced without preamble, his voice carrying the faint trace of what Micah's father called old money Boston. "Clear. Your desks except for a pencil." The collective groan was immediate, but quiet enough that Mr. Talbot could pretend not to hear it. Micah saw Emily's shoulders tense. Even for her, surprise tests were unwelcome. Carlos shot him a panicked look. "Sir," ventured Lily Patel from the front row, "you said our next quiz would be on Friday." Mr. Talbot's pale blue eyes fixed on her with cool assessment. "I changed my mind, Miss Patel. That's a privilege teachers still have, last I checked." As he distributed the papers, face down on each desk, Micah noticed how Mr. Talbot's demeanor shifted slightly, depending on which student he approached. A smile for Jason Williams, the principal's son. A nod for Abigail Foster, whose father was on the school board. For Carlos, nothing. For Emily, a slight frown. And when he reached Micah, "Mr. Reyes," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "let's see if you can keep up today." Micah kept his eyes down, accepting the paper with a barely audible, "Thank you, sir." He felt the stares of his classmates, but didn't look up until Mr. Talbot had moved on. The quiz was on differential equations, material they hadn't covered yet. Micah recognized it from one of his mother's old textbooks, ones she'd brought from the Philippines and kept in a special bookcase at home. He knew how to solve every problem on the page, and that was exactly the issue. His pencil hovered over the paper as his father's words echoed in his mind. Keep your smartness hidden. He thought of the nights his mother would sit with him at their kitchen table, teaching him concepts years beyond his grade level, the pride in her eyes when he grasped complex theories quickly. Then he thought of her disappointment when he brought home report cards with carefully maintained B+ averages. You could do so much better, she would say softly. He's being smart in a different way, his father would counter. Micah began to work through the problems, deliberately introducing small errors, making his work messy enough to be believable. He finished with 15 minutes to spare, then pretended to struggle until Mr. Talbot called time. As they passed their papers forward, Carlos leaned over. That was brutal. I think I failed. It was pretty hard, Micah agreed, the lie sitting uncomfortably in his stomach. Miss Jang, Mr. Talbot called out as he collected the last papers. You seem distressed. Emily, whose face betrayed her frustration, straightened her spine. The material wasn't what we've been studying, Mr. Talbot. The purpose of education, Miss Jang, is to prepare you for challenges you haven't seen before. He tapped the stack of papers against his desk to align them. Anyone who has been paying proper attention should have been able to apply the principles we've covered. His eyes swept the room, pausing momentarily on Micah. There was something in that look, a calculation, an assessment, that made Micah's skin prickle with unease. For the rest of the class, Mr. Talbot lectured on probability theory. Micah took careful notes, raising his hand only once, making sure his question wasn't too insightful. The invisibility strategy, the survival tactic. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Mr. Talbot called out, "Mr. Reyes, a moment?" Micah froze, his backpack half-zipped. Carlos gave him a sympathetic look before filing out with the others, leaving Micah alone with the teacher. "Sir?" Micah approached the desk, keeping his expression neutral. Mr. Talbot held up Micah's quiz, which he had apparently already graded. A red C was circled at the top. "Explain this." I found it difficult, sir." "Did you?" Mr. Talbot's voice was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it more threatening. "Because you see, Mr. Reyes, I've been teaching mathematics for 22 years. I know what it looks like when a student is pretending to be less capable than they are." Micah's heart hammered against his ribs. "I don't understand." "Sir, I think you do." Mr. Talbot leaned forward. "Your errors are too precise, too calculated." He tapped the paper. "No one makes mistakes this specific unless they're doing it on purpose." The classroom suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Micah swallowed hard. "Tomorrow," Mr. Talbot said, his voice returning to its normal volume, "I expect to see your real capabilities. No more hiding. No more games." He slid the quiz across the desk. "You may go." Micah took the paper with trembling fingers and walked out, the weight of visibility already pressing down on his shoulders. The next morning dawned with the kind of perfect September clarity that made Portland feel magical. Crisp air, sunlight filtering through trees just beginning to hint at autumn colors. The distant silhouette of Mount Hood visible against a cloudless sky. None of this beauty registered with Micah as he walked to school, his mind replaying yesterday's conversation with Mr. Talbot on an endless loop. "Is something wrong?" his mother had asked at breakfast, noticing how he pushed his cereal around the bowl without eating. "Just thinking about a math problem," he'd replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. The problem was just more complicated than any equation. Now, as he approached the red brick facade of Roosevelt Middle School, Micah spotted Carlos waiting by the front steps, as he did every morning. "You survived Talbot's interrogation," Carlos said by way of greeting. "What did he want?" Micah hesitated. "He thinks I'm not trying hard enough." Carlos snorted. "Classic. When I struggle, that's because some students aren't cut out for advanced placement. When you struggle, it's because you're not trying." He kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk. "No winning with that guy." They headed inside, joining the river of students flowing through the hallways. Micah caught glimpses of familiar dynamics, the 8th grade athletes commanding the center of the corridor, younger students hugging, the walls, teachers monitoring with varying degrees of attentiveness, normal school politics that suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the choice Micah now faced. "Hey," Emily fell into step beside them, her backpack visibly heavy with books. "Did you guys check the online gradebook? Talbot already posted yesterday's quiz scores." "Already?" Carlos groaned. "I'm afraid to look." "I got a B minus, Emily said, her dissatisfaction evident, which is ridiculous because half the questions were on material we haven't covered yet. She glanced at Micah. What did you get? C minus, Micah admitted. Emily's eyebrows rose. That's surprising. I thought you were good at math. I am, Micah said quietly, then immediately regretted it. The first bell rang, saving him from elaboration. They hurried to their lockers, then separated for their morning classes. Micah moved through English and history in a daze, answering when called upon, but otherwise lost in thought. By the time lunch arrived, he had made his decision. He would stop hiding. Not completely, that felt too dangerous, too exposed, but enough to satisfy Mr. Talbot's scrutiny. He would show just enough of his ability to deflect suspicion without drawing too much attention. He was so preoccupied with this plan that he nearly walked past his usual lunch table, where Carlos and Emily were already seated. "Earth to Micah," Carlos called, waving a French fry like a beacon. "You look like you're navigating Mars without a map." Micah managed a smile as he sat down. "Sorry, just thinking." "About Talbot's class?" Emily asked, her intuition sharp as always. "I've been thinking about it too. Something feels off about those quizzes." "What do you mean?" Carlos asked around a mouthful of sandwich. Emily lowered her voice. "I think he's testing some of us differently than others. Have you noticed how Jason and Abigail always seem to know exactly what's coming? And then there's us." Micah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cafeteria's air conditioning. "You think he's, what, playing favorites? I think it's worse than that." Emily's dark eyes were serious. "My sister had him 2 years ago. She said he has expectations about which students should succeed and which ones shouldn't." "Based on what?" Carlos asked. Though his expression suggested he already knew the answer, Emily just looked at him, then at Micah, her silence more eloquent than words. The rest of lunch passed with lighter conversation. A new sci-fi show Carlos was watching, Emily's debate team preparations, the upcoming science fair. Normal topics that helped settle Micah's nerves before the inevitable. 7th period advanced mathematics with Mr. Talbot. When the time came, Micah entered the classroom with deliberate calm. He took his usual seat, arranged his notebook and pencils with methodical precision, and waited. Carlos slipped in moments before the final bell, slightly out of breath as usual. Emily was already in her seat, posture perfect, eyes forward. Mr. Talbot entered with the same commanding presence as always, but today there was an additional energy about him, a barely perceptible tension in his movements as he set up for the day's lesson. Micah recognized it immediately as anticipation. "Before we begin today's material," Mr. Talbot announced, "I'd like to try something different." He turned to the whiteboard and began writing. What emerged was not the expected probability formulas, but a complex equation that sprawled across the entire board, something Micah recognized from his mother's graduate-level textbooks. It involved multiple variables, complex functions, and required understanding of concepts far beyond middle school mathematics. The class fell silent, staring at the intimidating wall of symbols and numbers. "This," Mr. Talbot said with quiet satisfaction, "is an equation that most college students would struggle with." He turned to face the class. "Who would like to attempt it?" No hands went up, not even Emily's, which was unprecedented. "No volunteers." Mr. Talbot's smile was thin. "Then I'll have to select someone." His eyes moved deliberately across the room before landing exactly where Micah had known they would. "Mr. Reyes, please come to the board." Micah felt every eye in the room turn to him. His legs seemed to move of their own accord, carrying him to the front of the classroom. The walk felt endless, each step bringing him further from the safety of invisibility. Standing before the equation, marker in hand, he felt dizzy with conflicting impulses. Pretend to be confused? Try but fail? Solve it partially? Before he could decide, Mr. Talbot spoke again, his voice carrying clearly to every corner of the suddenly silent room. "Solve this equation, Micah, and my entire salary is yours. That's $85,000, more than your family's ever seen." The words landed like physical blows. Micah heard Carlos's sharp intake of breath, saw Emily's hand move to her phone out of the corner of his eye. The rest of the class seemed frozen in collective shock. In that moment, something shifted inside Micah, a quiet, tectonic movement of resolve. The carefully maintained walls of caution and self-protection began to crumble. replaced by a clarity he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He turned to Mr. Talbot, meeting his eyes directly for perhaps the first time. "May I have 20 minutes?" His voice was steady, surprising even himself. Mr. Talbot's expression flickered, surprise quickly masked by skepticism. "By all means," he said, gesturing to the board with exaggerated courtesy. "Take all the time you need." Micah turned back to the board, the marker suddenly feeling right in his hand. He took a deep breath and began to write. The classroom became unnaturally still as Micah's hand moved across the whiteboard. The only sounds were the soft squeak of the marker against the smooth surface and the occasional rustle of clothing as students shifted in their seats, craning their necks for a better view. What they witnessed was not the hesitant scribbling of a confused student, but the methodical, confident strokes of someone navigating familiar territory. Mr. Talbot's smug expression gradually transformed as he watched Micah work. The slight smile faded, replaced by furrowed brows and narrowed eyes. He crossed his arms, then uncrossed them, then stepped closer to the board, scanning the developing solution with increasing intensity. Emily, meanwhile, had positioned her phone discreetly on her lap, its camera lens capturing every moment. Carlos sat motionless, his usual fidgeting completely absent, eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning comprehension. Micah worked in silence, his mind clear and focused. The complex equation unfolded before him like a familiar landscape, each variable a landmark, each function a path leading inevitably toward the solution. His mother's voice echoed in his memory, guiding him through similar problems at their kitchen table. "Mathematics is a language, Micah. When you truly understand it, you're not solving problems, you're having a conversation." This was a conversation he knew how to have. 15 minutes into his allotted 20, Micah stepped back from the board. The whiteboard was now covered with neat rows of mathematical notation, each step flowing logically to the next, culminating in a final, elegant solution. He capped the marker and turned to face the class. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. 27 faces stared back at him with expressions ranging from confusion to awe. Emily's eyes were wide, her phone now held openly in her hand. Carlos's mouth hung slightly open, his head tilted as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. And Mr. Talbot, the confident, imposing Mr. Talbot, stood perfectly still, his face drained of color. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, from the back of the room, someone whispered, "Did he actually solve it?" Mr. Talbot cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. "That's not possible. You must have seen this problem before." Micah shook his head. "No, sir, I haven't." "Then you copied it from somewhere, a formula sheet perhaps, your phone." "I don't have my phone with me, sir, and I didn't copy anything." The accusation hung in the air, poisonous and desperate. Emily stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Mr. Talbot, I recorded the whole thing." Micah didn't look at anything except the board. "Sit down, Miss Zhang," Mr. Talbot snapped. "Using phones in class is against school policy." "So is bullying students," she replied, her voice trembling slightly but determined. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Then from the doorway came a new voice. "What's going on here?" Principal Monica Harris stood in the open doorway, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. A tall woman with short silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect without demanding it. She surveyed the scene with practiced efficiency. The equation-covered board, Micah standing alone at the front, Mr. Talbot's obvious distress, and the unusually silent students. "Dr. Harris, sir," Mr. Talbot began, his voice regaining some of its authority. "I was just conducting a teaching demonstration." "I see." The principal's eyes moved to the board, scanning the complex mathematics, then to Micah. "And you are—" "Micah Reyes, ma'am, 7th grade." Something in her expression shifted. A slight widening of the eyes, a subtle nod of recognition. "Mr. Reyes, yes." She looked back at the board. "Did you solve this equation?" Before Micah could answer, Mr. Talbot interjected. "He claims to have, but I suspect—" "I asked Mr. Reyes," Dr. Harris said firmly, her gaze never leaving Micah. "Yes, ma'am, I solved it." She nodded thoughtfully. "And what was the purpose of this demonstration, Mr. Talbot?" The classroom went silent again. Every student seemed to be holding their breath. Micah felt a sudden urge to return to his invisibility, to shrink away from the spotlight that now illuminated him so completely, but it was too late for that. "Mr. Talbot said if I solved it he would give me his salary," Micah said quietly. $85,000. He said it was more than my family had ever seen. The ripple of shocked murmurs that went through the classroom confirmed the impact of his words. Dr. Harris's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "I see," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Mr. Talbot, please come with me to my office." "Ms. Rodriguez?" She nodded to the teaching assistant who had appeared behind her. "Please supervise this class until the period ends." She turned to Micah. "You too, Mr. Reyes." As they left the classroom, Micah caught a glimpse of Carlos giving him a thumbs up, and Emily holding up her phone with a meaningful look. The message was clear. She had evidence. The walk to the principal's office was silent and tense. Micah followed a few steps behind the adults, his mind racing. Had he made a terrible mistake? What would his parents say? Would Mr. Talbot find a way to punish him for this? When they reached the office, Dr. Harris gestured for them to sit in the two chairs facing her desk. She remained standing, her hands clasped behind her back. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to be very clear about something. This school has a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior of any kind, from anyone." She looked pointedly at Mr. Talbot. "Now I'd like to hear exactly what happened in that classroom today. Mr. Talbot, you may start." Mr. Talbot shifted in his chair. "I was attempting to challenge the students, to inspire them with advanced material. By offering your salary to a 12-year-old student? That was hyperbole, a figure of speech to motivate. And the comment about his family?" Mr. Talbot's jaw tightened. "A misunderstanding." Dr. Harris turned to Micah. "Mr. Reyes, please tell me your version of events." Micah took a deep breath. He thought of his father's advice about keeping his head down, about not making waves. He thought of his mother's quiet disappointment each time he deliberately underperformed. He thought of Carlos and Emily, and all the other students who had ever felt the sting of Mr. Talbot's expectations. "Mr. Talbot has been treating me differently since the beginning of the year," he said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. "Yesterday, he accused me of deliberately doing poorly on a quiz. Today, he called me to the board to solve an equation that he said college students would struggle with. He told the whole class that if I solved it, he would give me his salary, and he said it was more than my family had ever seen." "I see." Dr. Harris's voice was soft but firm. "And how did that make you feel?" The question caught Micah off guard. Adults rarely asked how he felt about things, especially at school. "It made me feel," he searched for the right word, "so visible, like everyone could suddenly see something I've been trying to hide." "And what is that, Mr. Reyes?" Micah looked down at his hands. "That I understand math, really understand it. My mom was a professor in the Philippines. She's been teaching me since I was little. But when we came here, my dad said it was better if I didn't stand out too much, that people don't always like it when," he trailed off, "when children like you excel." Dr. Harris finished for him. Micah nodded. Dr. Harris turned back to Mr. Talbot. "Do you have anything to add?" The mathematics teacher's face had settled into a mask of professional detachment. "I believe there's been a misinterpretation of my teaching methods. If Mr. Reyes felt targeted, that was certainly not my intention." Dr. Harris held his gaze for a long moment. "We'll continue this discussion later, with the district's HR representative present. For now, you're dismissed. Please ask Ms. Rodriguez to continue with your classes for the remainder of the day." After Mr. Talbot left, closing the door with careful restraint, Dr. Harris sat down behind her desk and let out a long breath. "Micah," she said, her formality softening, "I owe you an apology on behalf of this school." By the next morning, the story of what had happened in Mr. Talbot's classroom had spread through Roosevelt Middle School like wildfire. The details grew more dramatic with each retelling. Some versions claimed Micah had solved the equation in 30 seconds flat. Others suggested Mr. Talbot had been escorted from the building by security. The truth, as always, was somewhere in between these extremes. But one fact remained. Undisputed, something significant had changed. Micah arrived at school to find Carlos waiting in their usual spot, practically bouncing with excitement. "Dude!" Carlos exclaimed the moment Micah was within earshot. "You're famous! Emily's video has over 2,000 views on Instagram already." Micah stopped short. "What video?" "The one she took of you solving that crazy equation. She posted it." Last night with the caption, "Watch a middle schooler destroy a teacher's attempt at public humiliation." It's going viral. A cold wave of panic washed over Micah. She posted it online, with my face. Carlos's enthusiasm dimmed slightly at Micah's reaction. "Well, yeah, I mean, it's awesome what you did. People should see it." Before Micah could respond, Emily appeared beside them, her phone in hand. "Morning, math genius," she said with a grin. "You're officially trending at Roosevelt." "Emily, why did you post that video?" Micah asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily's smile faltered. "Because what happened wasn't right, and people should know about it. Mr. Talbot has been getting away with this kind of behavior for years." She studied his face. "Are you upset?" Micah struggled to articulate the complex mix of emotions churning inside him. "I don't want to be the center of attention." "Too late for that," Carlos said, gesturing toward the school entrance where several students were openly staring in their direction. "But hey, it's good attention, right? You're like a hero now." Hero wasn't a word Micah had ever associated with himself. Dutiful son, yes. Hard-working student, certainly. Invisible boy, definitely. But hero? The label felt as uncomfortable as the stairs now following him through the hallway. As they approached their lockers, a group of 8th graders, students Micah had never spoken to before, actually nodded in his direction. A 6th grade girl whispered to her friend while looking at him with something akin to awe. Even Mr. Patel. The chemistry teacher gave him a discreet thumbs up as they passed in the corridor. "See," Emily said, noticing his bewilderment. "People respect what you did. Standing up to a bully is always the right choice." "I didn't stand up to him," Micah protested. "I just solved an equation." "Same thing," Carlos insisted. "You showed him he was wrong about you. That's standing up for yourself." Morning passed in a blur of whispers, glances, and unexpected greetings from students Micah had never noticed before. By lunchtime, he felt exhausted from the attention. He slid into his usual seat in the cafeteria, hoping for a brief respite, only to find that their normally quiet table was suddenly popular. "Mind if we join you?" asked Lily Patel, the girl who had questioned Mr. Talbot about the surprise quiz. Behind her stood 2 other students from their math class. Before Micah could respond, Emily gestured welcomingly. "Plenty of room." As the newcomers settled in, Lily leaned forward. "Is it true Mr. Talbot's been suspended?" "I heard he quit," one of the others chimed in. "Nobody knows for sure," Emily replied, "but Dr. Harris was definitely not happy with him. He deserves whatever he gets," Lily said with surprising vehemence. "Last year he told my brother his accent made him sound unprofessional and suggested he take speech therapy if he wanted to succeed in America." She looked at Micah. "That's why I was so amazed when you stood up to him." "I really didn't," Micah began, but was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Harris at their table. "Mr. Reyes," she said, with a gentle smile, "may I speak with you for a moment?" The table fell silent as Micah stood to follow the principal to a quieter corner of the cafeteria. "I wanted to let you know," Dr. Harris said once they were out of earshot, "that I've spoken with your parents." Micah's stomach dropped. "You have?" "Yes. They're coming in this afternoon for a meeting." She must have noticed his expression, because she added quickly, "This isn't about you being in trouble, Micah. Quite the opposite. But there are some important matters we need to discuss with them present." "Like what?" Dr. Harris considered him thoughtfully. "Like your academic future at Roosevelt, and some changes we need to make to ensure what happened yesterday doesn't happen again, to you or anyone else." After she left, Micah returned to the table in a daze. His parents were coming to school. They would learn everything: the equation, Mr. Talbot's challenge, his decision to stop hiding his abilities. His careful balancing act was collapsing, and he had no idea what would emerge from the ruins. "What did she want?" Carlos asked as Micah sat back down. "My parents are coming in for a meeting this afternoon." Emily winced sympathetically. "Are you in trouble?" "I don't think so. She said it's about my academic future, whatever that means." "Maybe they'll put you in advanced classes," Lily suggested. "Like, really advanced." The thought had occurred to Micah too, and it filled him with conflicting emotions. Part of him, the part that had spent countless hours absorbing his mother's teachings with genuine passion, thrilled at the idea of finally being challenged. Another part, the one shaped by his father's cautious pragmatism, recoiled from the prospect of standing out even more than he already had. The rest of the day passed with excruciating slowness. By the time his last class ended, Micah had imagined every possible scenario for the upcoming meeting, each more anxiety-inducing than the last. He made his way to Dr. Harris's office with leaden feet, his backpack feeling unusually heavy on his shoulders. When he arrived, he found his parents already seated inside. His mother's face lit up when she saw him, while his father's expression remained carefully neutral, a contrast that perfectly embodied their different approaches to Micah's education. "Micah," his mother said, rising to embrace him. "Dr. Harris has been telling us about yesterday. We're very proud of you, son," his father added, though Micah detected a note of concern beneath the praise. Dr. Harris gestured for Micah to take the remaining seat. "Now that we're all here, I'd like to discuss something remarkable that has come to light." She opened a folder on her desk. "After our conversation yesterday, I did some research. Specifically, I looked into academic journals publishing work in higher mathematics." She looked directly at Micah. "Would you like to tell your parents about MJR?" Micah felt the blood drain from his face. His mother gasped softly beside him. "MJR?" his father repeated, confused. "What is that?" "Not what," Dr. Harris said. "Who? MJR is the author credited on several papers, published in respected mathematics journals over the past 2 years, papers that explore original approaches to complex algebraic problems." She looked at Micah's mother. "Papers that were submitted with your email address, Dr. Reyes." Isabel Reyes reached for her son's hand. "Micah Juan Reyes," she said softly. "You've been publishing your work?" Micah nodded, unable to find his voice. The secret that he had kept even from his parents, the late nights typing up his mathematical explorations, the correspondence with journal editors using his mother's email account, the pride of seeing his initials in print, was now exposed. "You've been publishing academic papers?" his father asked, astonishment overriding his usual caution. "At 12 years old?" "The first one was accepted when I was 10, Micah admitted in a small voice. I didn't think anyone would publish it if they knew how old I was, so I just used my initials." The office fell silent as the 3 adults processed this revelation. Micah's mother squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with tears of pride. His father stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. Dr. Harris closed the folder. "Micah, what happened in Mr. Talbot's classroom yesterday has started something important at this school. It's forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we recognize and nurture talent, especially when that talent comes in packages we don't expect." She leaned forward. "The question now is, what do we do next?" The silence in Dr. Harris's office stretched as Micah looked from his mother to his father, seeing 2 very different reactions playing across their faces. His mother's eyes shone with barely contained pride and vindication, while his father's expression shifted between astonishment and concern. "What options are we considering?" Isabel Reyes finally asked, her slight Filipino accent becoming more pronounced as it always did when she was emotional. Dr. Harris folded her hands on the desk. "There are several possibilities. Roosevelt has accelerated programs that Micah could join immediately. We could also arrange for dual enrollment with Portland Community College for more advanced coursework." She paused. "Or there are specialized schools for gifted students where Micah might find more appropriate challenges." "Specialized schools?" Joaquin Reyes repeated, his brow furrowing. "You mean sending him somewhere else?" "It's just one option," Dr. Harris assured him. "But given what I've learned about Micah's capabilities, it would be irresponsible not to consider all avenues." Micah's stomach tightened. He hadn't considered that his moment of defiance might result in leaving Roosevelt, leaving Carlos and Emily, the only friends he'd made since moving to America. "What do you want, Micah?" his mother asked, turning to him with unusual directness. The question caught him off guard. In the Reyes household, educational decisions were typically made by his parents, with his father having the final say. Being asked for his preference was unexpected and slightly overwhelming. He began, then stopped, organizing his thoughts. "I want to be challenged. I'm tired of hiding what I can do." He looked at his father apologetically. "But I don't want to leave Roosevelt. My friends are here." Joaquin's expression softened. "Son, your mother and I only want what's best for you. When we came to this country, I thought—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I thought keeping your head down was the safest path. I was trying to protect you." "I know, Dad. But perhaps I was wrong." Joaquin straightened in his chair. "Dr. Harris, is there a way for Micah to be appropriately challenged without changing schools?" Dr. Harris nodded thoughtfully. I believe so. We could create an individualized education plan, tailored specifically to Micah's abilities. He could remain in his regular classes for subjects like English and history, but receive special instruction for mathematics and sciences. And who would provide this instruction? Isabel asked. After what happened with Mr. Talbot, I'm concerned about the faculty's ability to support Micah properly. A fair concern, Dr. Harris acknowledged. Mr. Talbot's behavior was unacceptable, but he doesn't represent all of our teachers. Professor Jameson from Reed College has been mentoring some of our advanced students. I believe he'd be an excellent match for Micah's abilities. As the adults continued discussing logistics, Micah's thoughts drifted to the equation on the whiteboard, to the moment when everything changed. He thought about the faces of his classmates, their shock, their awe, and in some cases their newfound respect. He thought about Emily's video, now spreading across social media, making his private self undeniably public. There's something else we need to address, Dr. Harris said, interrupting Micah's thoughts. The incident in Mr. Talbot's classroom has gained significant attention. Emily Zhang's recording has been shared widely within our school community and beyond. Joaquin frowned. A video of Micah. Yes, it shows him solving the equation and captures Mr. Talbot's inappropriate comments. Dr. Harris turned to Micah. The video has resonated with many students and parents. It started important conversations about expectations, bias, and recognizing potential in all students. It's gone viral? Isabel asked, looking surprised. Within our community, yes. Several parents have contacted me about similar experiences their children have had, not just with Mr. Talbot, but throughout their educational journeys. Dr. Harris leaned forward. What happened in that classroom has become a catalyst for change. Micah absorbed this information with mixed emotions. On one hand, the idea that his moment of mathematical courage might help other students was deeply satisfying. On the other, the thought of being known, really known, after years of careful invisibility was terrifying. What about Mr. Talbot? He asked quietly. What's going to happen to him? The three adults exchanged glances. Mr. Talbot has been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation, Dr. Harris replied. His future at Roosevelt will depend on the outcome of that process, but regardless of what happens with him specifically, we're implementing new training programs for all faculty on unconscious bias and creating inclusive learning environments. Joaquin nodded slowly. So, Micah's actions may lead to broader changes. They already have, Dr. Harris confirmed. Sometimes it takes one brave person to illuminate issues that have been hidden in plain sight. The word brave echoed in Micah's mind. Was that what he had been? It hadn't felt like bravery at the time, more like a sudden, irresistible need to be seen for who he truly was, if only for a moment. I think, Isabel said, reaching for her son's hand, that we should support whatever decision Micah makes about his education going forward. He's proven he has the wisdom to choose his own path. Joaquin hesitated, then nodded. I agree. He turned to Micah. Son, your mother and I came to America to give you opportunities we didn't have. We thought we knew the best way to help you succeed here, but perhaps you understand some things better than we do. The weight of this new responsibility settled on Micah's shoulders, not as a burden but as an acknowledgement of growth. He sat up straighter. I want to stay at Roosevelt, he said decisively. I want to work with Professor Jameson and take advanced classes, but I also want to stay with my regular classes when possible. He thought of Carlos's friendship, of Emily's fierce support. I don't want to be completely separated from everyone else. Dr. Harris smiled. A thoughtful choice. We can certainly arrange that. As they worked out the details of Micah's new academic plan, a knock at the office door interrupted their discussion. Dr. Harris's assistant poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you might want to see. She handed Dr. Harris a tablet. The principal's eyebrows rose as she scanned the screen. It seems, she said, looking up at the Reyes family, that Emily's video has attracted attention beyond our school community. A reporter from the Oregonian is asking for a statement. A newspaper? Joaquin's alarm was evident. This is becoming too public. It's already public, Dad, Micah said softly. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Isabel studied her son with new appreciation. What are you thinking, Micah? He took a deep breath. I'm thinking that if what happened to me happens to other kids too, then maybe talking about it could help change things. Not just at Roosevelt, But maybe at other schools too. The adults fell silent, considering his words. That's very mature perspective, Dr. Harris said finally. But you should know that once this story enters the public domain, you won't be able to control how it's told or who pays attention to it. I know, Micah said, though his heart raced at the thought. But isn't that true anyway? The video is already out there. Dr. Harris nodded thoughtfully. We could provide a simple statement confirming that an incident occurred and that the school is taking appropriate action. We wouldn't need to name you specifically. But people will know it's me, Micah pointed out. Yes, she acknowledged. They likely will. Joaquin placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. Micah, are you sure about this? Once you step into this kind of spotlight, it's difficult to step back out. Micah thought of all the times he'd made himself small, all the knowledge he'd hidden, all the questions he hadn't asked because they might reveal too much of his true capabilities. He thought of his mother's quiet disappointment each time he brought home work that didn't reflect his real abilities, and his father's well-intentioned but constraining protection. I'm sure, he said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. I'm tired of hiding. Isabel's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she nodded in support. Joaquin looked at his son for a long moment, then sighed and turned to Dr. Harris. If this is what Micah wants, we'll support him, but we would like to review any statement before it's released. As they left the office an hour later, a comprehensive plan in place for both Micah's education and the school's response to media inquiries, Micah felt lighter than he had in years. The path ahead was uncertain and potentially difficult, but for the first time since arriving in America, he felt like he was walking it as his true self. The following Monday morning dawned clear and cool, with autumn firmly asserting itself across Portland. Micah stood at the bus stop, his backpack feeling unusually light, despite containing the same books as always. Perhaps he thought it was the absence of secrets that made the difference. The weekend had passed in a whirlwind of activity. Saturday's edition of the Oregonian had featured a small but prominent article titled Middle School Math. Prodigy challenges classroom bias, accompanied by a school photo of Micah that his parents had reluctantly approved. By Sunday, local TV stations had picked up the story, and Dr. Harris had fielded calls from education reporters across the state. Through it all, Micah had remained largely sheltered at home, processing the rapid changes in his life with the help of his parents. His mother had pulled out boxes of his old math notebooks, marveling at work she hadn't seen before. His father had spent hours talking with him about courage and identity in ways they'd never discussed previously. Now, as the yellow school bus approached, Micah steeled himself for whatever reception awaited him at Roosevelt. "Hey, math genius," Carlos called the moment Micah stepped onto the bus. He was sitting, halfway back, saving a seat as usual, his familiar grin a welcome sight. Micah slid in beside him, relief washing over him. "So, we're still friends?" Carlos looked genuinely confused. "Why wouldn't we be?" "I don't know. Everything's different now." "Not everything," Carlos insisted. "You're still you, you're just not pretending anymore." He pulled out his phone. "By the way, have you seen this? Someone remixed Emily's video with music. It's got like 50,000 views now." Micah groaned. "Seriously? Relax. It makes you look awesome, like some kind of math superhero." Carlos's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Oh," and Emily texted. "She's waiting for us at the front entrance with Lily and some others. They're calling themselves the Equation Squad now." "The what?" "Yeah, it's a little cheesy," Carlos admitted. "But they mean well. They're organizing a student petition about teacher accountability or something." As the bus pulled up to Roosevelt, Micah caught sight of Emily standing on the front steps with several other students. She waved enthusiastically when she spotted him. Beside her was Lily Patel holding what appeared to be a handmade poster. "Ready for this?" Carlos asked as they gathered their backpacks. Micah took a deep breath. "I guess so." The moment they stepped off the bus, Emily rushed over. "You're here. We were starting to think you might not come today." She lowered her voice. "There are reporters across the street. The school won't let them on property, but Dr. Harris said they might try to talk to you anyway." Micah glanced over and saw two news vans parked beyond the school boundaries. His stomach tightened. "Don't worry," Emily continued. "We've got your back. Operation Shield Micah is in full effect." "Operation what?" Micah asked weakly. "It was Lily's idea," Emily explained as they headed inside, flanked by the self-proclaimed equation squad. "We're running interference so you don't get bombarded with questions all day. We've got rotations set up for between classes." Micah wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or mortified. "You guys don't have to—" "We want to," Lily interrupted. "What happened in Mr. Talbot's class wasn't just about you. It was about all of us who've ever been made to feel like we don't belong or can't succeed." She looked at him earnestly. "You stood up for yourself, and now we're standing up with you." As they navigated the hallways, Micah became acutely aware of the stares and whispers following them. Some students offered encouraging smiles, others watched with undisguised curiosity. A few teachers nodded respectfully as he passed. When they reached his locker, Micah found it decorated with colorful sticky notes bearing messages like "Math Legend" and "Equation King," and even one that read, "Talbot got schooled." He removed the last one quickly, uncomfortable with the mockery despite everything. "That was Jason Williams," Emily explained, noticing his reaction. "He's been telling everyone how Mr. Talbot always gave him special treatment because of his dad. He feels pretty bad about it now." The first bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until classes began. The hallway bustled with increased activity as students hurried to their destinations. "What's your first class today?" Carlos asked. "English with Ms. Winters," Micah replied. "Perfect. Lily's in that class too. She'll walk with you." Carlos clapped him on the shoulder. "See you at lunch." As Micah and Lily headed toward the English wing, she spoke quietly. "You know, my brother cried when he saw the video. He said he wished someone had done that when he was in Mr. Talbot's class last year. I didn't really do it on purpose," Micah admitted. "I just couldn't pretend anymore." "Sometimes that's the bravest thing," Lily said with surprising wisdom. "Just being who you really are." English class passed in a blur of furtive glances and whispered comments, though Ms. Winters maintained firm control, treating Micah exactly as she always had. When she assigned partner work on their current novel, 3 students immediately turned toward Micah's desk, a stark contrast to previous classes where he'd often been the last chosen. The pattern repeated throughout the morning. In history, Mr. Abernathy asked Micah a question about the Philippine-American War that he'd never brought up before. In science, his lab group suddenly wanted his opinion on everything. By lunchtime, Micah felt exhausted from the constant attention. The cafeteria presented a new challenge. As he entered with Carlos and Emily, a hush fell over the nearest tables, followed by a wave of whispers that spread across the room. Their usual isolated corner table was now surrounded by other students, clearly hoping to join them. "We can eat outside if you want," Emily offered, noticing Micah's overwhelmed expression. He was about to agree when a new voice called his name. Turning, he saw Dr. Harris approaching with a tall, bearded man he didn't recognize. "Micah, I'd like you to meet Professor James Jameson from Reed College," Dr. Harris said. "He's agreed to work with you as we discussed." Professor Jameson extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Micah. I've read your papers. Quite impressive work for a mathematician of any age." Micah shook the professor's hand, momentarily speechless. This man, a real college professor, had read his work and found it impressive. "We were hoping you might be available after school today for an initial assessment," Dr. Harris continued. "Professor Jameson would like to get a better understanding of your knowledge base to create an appropriate curriculum." "Yes, of course," Micah managed. "Excellent. We'll meet in the conference room at 3:30. Dr. Harris smiled encouragingly. "How has your day been so far?" Micah glanced around at the watching eyes, the whispers, the new attention. "Different," he said finally. "Change often is," she replied, "but sometimes different is exactly what we need." As Dr. Harris and Professor Jameson departed, Carlos nudged him. "Dude, you're getting a college professor as your personal tutor. That's seriously cool." "I guess it is," Micah agreed, beginning to see the opportunities that his new visibility might bring. They found a relatively quiet table in the corner of the cafeteria, joined by Emily, Lily, and a few others from their classes. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally from the morning's classes to weekend plans to the upcoming science fair. No one pressed Micah about the equation or the video or the newspaper article. For those brief moments, he felt almost normal again, visible but not just for one extraordinary moment. As lunch ended, Emily checked her phone and frowned. "Heads up, the local news. Here's doing a segment on academic discrimination tonight, and they're mentioning Roosevelt specifically." "Are they using Micah's name?" Carlos asked. Probably. It's already out there. She looked at Micah apologetically. Sorry about posting that video. I didn't think it would get this big. Micah considered this. A week ago, the thought of being discussed on the evening news would have horrified him. Now, though, he felt a strange sense of calm. It's okay, he said. Maybe it needed to happen. Professor Jameson's assessment session turned out to be unlike any test Micah had ever taken. Rather than formal problems on paper, they engaged in a wide-ranging mathematical conversation that flowed organically from basic principles to complex theories. The professor would introduce a concept, then watch carefully as Micah worked through its implications, occasionally asking questions that pushed the boundaries of Micah's knowledge. Your intuitive understanding of abstract algebra is remarkable, Professor Jameson noted as they wrapped up their third hour together. The conference room table was now covered with sheets of paper filled with equations, diagrams, and notes. You've developed some approaches I've never seen before. Micah ducked his head, still unused to direct praise. My mom taught me the basics, but I figured out some shortcuts on my own. Those aren't shortcuts, the professor corrected gently. They're innovations. There's a difference. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. I think I have enough to design a curriculum that will challenge you, appropriately without overwhelming you. Dr. Harris, who had been observing quietly from the corner, stepped forward. How would you assess Micah's current level, Professor? Professor Jameson scratched his beard thoughtfully. In terms of pure mathematical understanding, he's functioning at an advanced undergraduate level, perhaps early graduate in some areas. He smiled at Micah. But there are still plenty of mathematical landscapes for us to explore together. The professor's words sent a thrill of excitement through Micah, the promise of new challenges, new discoveries, new territories where his mind could roam freely. We'll start next Monday, Professor Jameson continued. 3 afternoons a week after your regular classes. We'll focus on advanced topics while still ensuring you have a solid foundation in all areas. He extended his hand. I'm looking forward to working with you, Micah. As Micah's parents drove him home that evening, the car was filled with a new energy. His mother asked detailed questions about the assessment, while his father listened with growing pride evident in his expression. Professor Jameson says I have an intuitive approach to problem solving, Micah explained, still marveling at the idea. He wants to help me develop it, while also teaching me formal mathematical methods I haven't encountered yet. This is what I always hoped for you, Isabel said, reaching back to squeeze his hand. A mentor who truly sees your potential. I'm sorry I held you back, Joaquin added quietly. I was so focused on protecting you that I didn't see how you needed to be challenged. You were just trying to help me fit in, Dad, Micah replied. I understand. That night, as Micah prepared for bed, his phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Channel 8 just did the story about Roosevelt. They showed Emily's video and interviewed some parents. They didn't use your name, but everyone will know it's you anyway. You okay? Micah stared at the message for a long moment. The question seemed simple, but the answer was surprisingly complex. Was he okay with his sudden visibility after years of strategic invisibility, with becoming a symbol in a larger conversation about bias and expectations, with having his mathematical abilities, once his most closely guarded secret, now known to everyone? He typed back, I think I am. It's weird, but not bad weird. Carlos responded immediately. Good weird then. See you tomorrow, math legend. Micah smiled at the nickname that would have mortified him just days ago. Maybe being known, truly known, wasn't as terrifying as he'd imagined. The next morning, Micah discovered just how quickly the world could change. As he walked into his first class, Ms. Winters handed him a note from the office. Dr. Harris needed to see him immediately. Carlos raised his eyebrows questioningly, but Micah could only shrug in response. When he arrived at the principal's office, he found Dr. Harris looking both excited and slightly overwhelmed. Micah, she said, gesturing for him to sit. I wanted to speak with you before you heard this from anyone else. She took a deep breath. After last night's news segment, we've received calls from several organizations. The STEM Education Coalition wants to feature your story in their newsletter. The National Association for Gifted Children has reached out about a potential scholarship. And, she paused, clearly saving the most significant news for last, TED Talks is interested in having you speak at their upcoming education conference. Micah blinked, certain he had misheard. TED Talks like the videos online? Exactly like that, Dr. Harris confirmed. They're organizing a special youth panel on educational equity and student empowerment. They want you to share your experience. But I'm not a public speaker, Micah protested. I'm just a kid who solved an equation. You're much more than that, Micah. You've become a catalyst for important conversations about bias in education, about recognizing potential in unexpected places. She leaned forward. That said, you don't have to do any of this. You can decline all these requests and focus solely on your studies. The choice is entirely yours. Micah stared at his hands, processing this dramatic escalation of events. His instinct was to retreat, to return to the comfort of anonymity. But then he thought of Lily's brother, crying with recognition when he saw the video. He thought of Emily's determination to expose unfairness, of Carlos's steady friendship, of his mother's pride, and his father's growing understanding. "Can I think about it?" he asked finally. "Of course, take all the time you need." The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes, whispered conversations, and sideways glances. By afternoon, word had spread about the TED Talk invitation, somehow leaked despite Dr. Harris's discretion. As Micah walked to his final class of the day, a sixth-grade girl he'd never met stopped him in the hallway. "Are you really going to be on TED Talks?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I haven't decided yet," Micah replied honestly. The girl fidgeted with her backpack strap. "I hope you do it. My dad says I shouldn't try to be too smart, because boys don't like smart girls. But maybe if he sees your talk, he'll change his mind." Before Micah could respond, she hurried away, leaving him standing in the middle of the hallway, stunned by the implications of her words. His decision, he realized, wasn't just about himself anymore. It had ripples that extended far beyond his own life. That evening, he sat with his parents at their kitchen table, the same table where his mother had first taught him algebra, where his father had helped him practice English, where they had shared countless meals and conversations as a family. "I want to do the TED Talk," Micah announced after explaining all the opportunities Dr. Harris had presented. "I think it's important." Isabel reached for his hand. "Are you sure, Anak? It's a lot of pressure." "I'm not sure I'll be good at it," Micah admitted, "but I'm sure I should try." Joaquin studied his son's face. "What changed, Micah? You've always wanted to stay in the background." Micah thought about the question carefully. I realize that hiding who I am doesn't actually protect me. It just makes me smaller." He looked at his father. "You always told me to keep my head down because you wanted me to be safe. But maybe the safest thing is to be completely myself, with people who accept me that way." Joaquin's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. "When did you get so wise, Hijo?" "I had good teachers," Micah replied, smiling at both his parents. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity. Micah began his special tutoring sessions with Professor Jameson, diving into mathematical realms he'd only glimpsed before. He worked with a speech coach provided by TED to prepare for his talk. He met with Dr. Harris and a district committee to help develop new protocols for identifying and supporting gifted students from diverse backgrounds. Through it all, Carlos and Emily remained steadfastly by his side, providing friendship and normalcy amid the growing attention. They created a study group that met twice weekly, gradually expanding to include other students interested in mathematics and sciences. At home, subtle but significant changes transformed the Reyes household. Isabel brought her old textbooks out of storage, creating a small library in Micah's room. Joaquin hung Micah's published papers, now printed and framed on the living room wall, a public declaration of pride that would have been unthinkable months earlier. One afternoon, as Micah worked through a particularly challenging problem set from Professor Jameson, his father sat down beside him. "I've been thinking about something," Joaquin said. "When we came to America, I was so focused on helping you fit in that I never considered another possibility." "What's that?" Micah asked, setting down his pencil. "That perhaps America needed to make room for you, exactly as you are." Joaquin placed his hand on Micah's shoulder. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that." Micah leaned against his father's side the way he used to when he was younger. "We both needed time to figure things out." "Yes," Joaquin agreed, "but you figured it out first." The TED conference was held in Seattle on a rainy Saturday in November. Micah stood backstage, adjusting the collar of his new button-down shirt for the 5th time in as many minutes. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see the audience filing in. Educators, students, administrators, and activists from across the country all gathered to discuss the future of education. "Nervous?" asked Eliza Chen, the conference organizer, who had been corresponding with Micah and his family for weeks. "Terrified," Micah admitted. Eliza smiled. "That's completely normal. Just remember what we practiced. Speak from the heart, take your time, and remember why your story matters." In the front row, Micah could see his parents sitting alongside Dr. Harris, Professor Jameson, Carlos, and Emily. The school had arranged transportation for his friends to attend, recognizing their important roles in Micah's journey. Seeing their supportive faces helped steady his racing heart. "5 minutes," a stagehand announced, prompting Micah to run through his introduction one last time in his head. The youth panel consisted of 4 students from across the country, each with a unique perspective on educational equity. Micah would speak third, after a high school senior from Detroit who had created a peer tutoring program and a 9th grader from rural Montana who had advocated for advanced online courses in her small school district. As the lights dimmed and the conference host took the stage to welcome the audience, Micah closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The past 6 weeks had been a crash course in public speaking, media interaction, and advocacy, skills he'd never imagined needing. Dr. Harris had helped shield him from excessive attention while still encouraging him to share his story when appropriate. Professor Jameson had reminded him repeatedly that his mathematical abilities were just one aspect of who he was. The first 2 speakers delivered their talks, with poise and conviction, earning enthusiastic applause. Then the host returned to the microphone. "Our next speaker is Micah Reyes, a 7th grader from Portland, Oregon, whose experience sparked a national conversation about recognizing potential in all students. Please welcome Micah to the stage." The applause felt like a physical force as Micah walked to the center of the stage. The spotlight was blinding at first, making the audience a dark, indistinct mass beyond the edge of the stage. He approached the microphone, adjusted it downward for his height, and took another steadying breath. "My name is Micah Reyes," he began, his voice stronger than he expected. "6 weeks ago I was invisible, or at least I tried to be." He recounted the story of Mr. Talbot's challenge, the equation on the board, the offer of the salary. He described the feeling of standing at the whiteboard, marker in hand, deciding whether to continue hiding or to finally be seen. "In that moment," he said, "I wasn't just solving an equation. I was solving the equation of myself, figuring out who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live in the world." As he spoke, Micah found himself relaxing into the rhythm of the story. He talked about his parents' different perspectives, his mother's encouragement and his father's protective caution. He explained how he had learned to make himself smaller, to dim his own light, to be what others expected rather than what he truly was. "But here's what I've realized," he continued, gaining confidence. "When we hide who we are, whether because of fear or prejudice, or simply to make others comfortable, we don't just cheat ourselves, we cheat everyone around us. We cheat the world of our full contribution." Micah glanced at his father, whose eyes shone with a mixture of pride and what might have been regret. Joaquin nodded encouragingly, urging him to continue. "What happened in my classroom that day wasn't just about a math equation or a teacher's bias. It was about expectations, who gets to have them, who gets to exceed them, and who decides what's possible for each of us." He described the aftermath, the video that went viral, the news coverage, the changes at Roosevelt Middle School. He talked about Professor Jameson's mentorship and the new program being developed to identify and support students with exceptional abilities from all backgrounds. "But the most important change," Micah said, his voice softening, "happened inside me. I stopped being afraid of being seen. I stopped believing that making myself smaller would somehow make me safer." From the audience, Carlos gave him a thumbs up. Emily, beside him, was openly wiping tears from her eyes. "I'm still learning every day, not just mathematics, but how to be fully myself. In a world that sometimes has narrow ideas about who can excel and why, I'm learning that visibility isn't just about being seen, it's about being recognized for who you truly are." Micah reached the conclusion of his prepared remarks, but found himself adding one final thought that hadn't been in his practice sessions. "There's an equation I'd like to leave you with today. It's not the one I solved on the whiteboard that changed everything. It's simpler, but in many ways more powerful. Potential plus opportunity, plus recognition, transformation. He paused, allowing the formula to sink in. When we recognize the potential in every student, when we provide genuine opportunities without bias or preconception, we create the conditions for transformation, not just for individual students, but for education itself. The applause began before he had fully stepped away from the microphone, tentative at first, then swelling into a standing ovation that left Micah momentarily stunned. He spotted Dr. Harris on her feet, clapping with genuine emotion. Professor Jameson beamed beside her. His mother was crying openly while his father stood tall, applauding with unmistakable pride. As Micah made his way back to his seat for the panel discussion that would follow the individual talks, the conference host wiped away a tear of her own. "Thank you, Micah, for that powerful reminder of why we're all here today." The panel discussion flew by in a blur of thoughtful questions and earnest answers. Micah found himself speaking with growing confidence about his experiences and his hopes for the future. When asked about his next steps, he surprised himself by announcing a project he and Emily had only begun discussing. "My friends and I are starting a student advocacy group called Equation for Change," he explained. "We want to create a forum where students can share their experiences and work with teachers and administrators to create more inclusive learning environments." By the time the conference concluded, Micah was exhausted but exhilarated. As he rejoined his family and friends in the lobby, he was approached by educators from across the country, each eager to share how his story had resonated with them. "You've given us a lot to think about," said a superintendent from Chicago, shaking his hand. "We're going to be reviewing our gifted identification processes after hearing your talk." A mathematics professor from MIT handed him a business card. "When you're ready for college, call me. We'd love to have a mind like yours." Eventually, Dr. Harris noticed Micah's growing fatigue and skillfully extracted him from the crowd. Outside, the Seattle rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under the late afternoon sun. "You did, wonderfully," Isabel said, embracing her son tightly. "I'm so proud of you." "We both are," Joaquin added, placing his hand on Micah's shoulder. "You spoke with such wisdom." Carlos punched him lightly on the arm. "Dude, you're officially famous now. Does this mean you'll be too cool to hang out with us regular kids?" Micah laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. "Never. Who else would explain regular math to me? When I'm too busy with the crazy advanced stuff." Emily, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I recorded the whole thing," she said, waving her phone, "but I promise not to post this one without permission." They all laughed, the shared joke a reminder of how this journey had begun. "What happens now?" Micah asked as they walked toward the restaurant where they planned to celebrate. "Now," Dr. Harris replied, "you keep being exactly who you are, a remarkable young man with a bright future and an important voice. And we support you every step of the way," Professor Jameson added, "wherever your path leads." As they walked through the gleaming streets of Seattle, Micah felt a profound sense of alignment, as if the different parts of his life that had once seemed in conflict were now working in harmony. The equation he had presented in his talk echoed in his mind: potential plus opportunity plus recognition, transformation. His own transformation, he realized, was still unfolding, not just in the classroom or on stages like the one he'd just left, but in the everyday moments of being truly seen and accepted for who he was. Winter settled over Portland, bringing a blanket of snow that transformed the city into a glistening wonderland. At Roosevelt Middle School, the semester was drawing to a close, and the hallways buzzed with anticipation for the upcoming holiday break. For Micah, the past 2 months since the TED Talk had been a period of remarkable growth and adjustment. Equation for Change had blossomed from a simple idea into a thriving student organization, with chapters forming in schools across Portland. What began as weekly meetings in Dr. Harris's conference room now required the school library to accommodate all the participants. Emily served as president, with Micah and Carlos as co-vice presidents, while Lily headed their outreach committee. "We've received inquiries from 12 more schools this week," Emily announced during their Friday afternoon meeting, 2 in Seattle, 1 in Boise, and the rest here in Oregon. "We need to create an onboarding guide," Lily suggested, ever practical, "something that explains our mission and how to start a local chapter." Carlos nodded enthusiastically. "I could design a website. My cousin teaches web development at Portland Community College. He'd help us." Micah observed his friends with quiet appreciation. What had begun as a response to his personal experience had evolved into something much larger, a movement led by students for students, focused on creating educational environments where everyone could thrive. "What do you think, Micah?" Emily asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "I think it's amazing," he replied honestly. "I never expected any of this when I solved that equation." After the meeting, Micah headed to the mathematics department where Professor Jameson waited for their tri-weekly tutoring session. These afternoons had become Micah's favorite part of the school week. Challenging, certainly, but also deeply fulfilling as he explored mathematical concepts that had previously existed only in his imagination. "I have something special planned today," Professor Jameson announced as Micah entered. "A guest has joined us." Sitting beside the professor's desk was a woman in her early 30s with short black hair and keen eyes that immediately reminded Micah of his mother. "This is Dr. Una Park," Professor Jameson explained. "She's a mathematician at Princeton, specializing in algebraic topology, and she read your most recent paper with great interest." Micah's latest work, published under his full name for the first time, explored a novel approach to understanding complex topological spaces. Writing it had been exhilarating, but having it accepted by the Journal of Mathematical Research had been even more so. "Your intuitive approach to persistent homology is fascinating," Dr. Park said, extending her hand. "Especially your application to neural network architecture. I'd like to discuss a potential collaboration." For the next hour, the three mathematicians, one established professor, one rising academic star, and one 12-year-old prodigy, engaged in a conversation that would have been incomprehensible to most adults. They sketched diagrams, debated theoretical implications, and eventually outlined a research project that bridged Dr. Park's expertise with Micah's innovative approach. "This could be significant," Professor Jameson commented as they wrapped up. "Micah, are you interested in pursuing this collaboration?" "Definitely," Micah replied without hesitation. 6 months ago, he would have shied away from such visibility in the mathematical community. Now, he embraced it. As Micah gathered his notebooks, Dr. Park handed him a brochure. "Princeton has a summer program for exceptional young mathematicians. We'd love to have you join us for 6 weeks next year." Micah stared at the glossy pamphlet, momentarily speechless. "Princeton? As in New Jersey. We'd provide housing for you and a parent," Dr. Park continued. "You'd work directly with our faculty and other gifted students from around the world." The old Micah would have immediately thought of all the reasons to decline: the attention, the pressure, the separation from his comfortable routine. The new Micah saw possibility. "I'll discuss it with my parents," he promised. That evening, as the Reyes family sat down to dinner, Micah shared the invitation. To his surprise, both parents responded with immediate enthusiasm. "Princeton," Isabel said, her eyes shining. "That's extraordinary, Micah." "You'd spend 6 weeks on the East Coast," Joaquin added, and Micah braced himself for concerns about safety or practicality. Instead, his father continued, "What an amazing opportunity to experience a different part of America." The shift in his father's perspective was perhaps the most profound change of all. Where once Joaquin had encouraged caution and conformity, he now celebrated Micah's expanding horizons. The protective instinct remained, but it had transformed, no longer shielding Micah from the world, but preparing him to engage with it on his own terms. "I could go with you for the first 2 weeks," Isabel offered. "Then perhaps your father could come for the middle portion, and I could return for the end." "You've planned this already?" Micah asked, surprised. His parents exchanged smiles. "We've been discussing what might come next for you," Joaquin explained. After the TED Talk, it seemed clear that more opportunities would arise. Later that night, as Micah prepared for bed, he found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey of the past few months. From the moment of the equation to the Princeton invitation, each step had built upon the last in ways he could never have anticipated. His phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. "Just saw online that Talbot got a job teaching at a private school in Seattle. Thoughts?" Micah considered the question carefully. Mr. Talbot had resigned from Roosevelt before the district's investigation concluded, avoiding formal disciplinary action. Micah had experienced a complex mix of emotions about the teacher's departure. Relief, certainly, but also a lingering sadness that such potential for growth had been lost. He typed back, "I hope he learned something from what happened." Carlos responded immediately. "You're a better person than I am. I'm still mad at him." "I'm not saying what he did was okay," Micah clarified. "Just that people can change. We all have." It was true. Emily had evolved from an achievement-focused student into a passionate advocate for educational equity. Carlos had discovered leadership abilities he'd never known he possessed. Lily had found her voice as a powerful communicator and organizer. And Micah had transformed most of all from a boy determined to be invisible to a young man stepping confidently into the light of his own potential. As he drifted toward sleep, Micah thought about the equation that had changed everything. Not the complex mathematical problem on Mr. Talbot's whiteboard, but the simple formula he'd offered in his TED Talk. Potential plus opportunity plus recognition, transformation. He was living proof of its truth. And with each passing day, as equation for change expanded and new opportunities arose, he was helping ensure that others would have the chance to discover their own transformative equations. Spring arrived in Portland with an explosion of cherry blossoms and fresh possibilities. At Roosevelt Middle School, the academic year was approaching its conclusion, bringing with it the natural reflection that accompanies endings and transitions. 4. Micah, who had entered 7th grade, determined to remain unseen and was now preparing to finish it as perhaps the school's most recognized student. The contrast could not have been more striking. On a sunny Tuesday morning, Dr. Harris's voice came over the intercom during homeroom. "Attention, all students and staff. Please report to the auditorium at 10 o'clock for a special assembly." Speculation ran wild through the hallways. A surprise performance? A famous visitor? An unexpected announcement? "Maybe they're finally going to name the new mathematics wing after you," Carlos joked as they walked to first period. Micah rolled his eyes. "Very funny. I'm serious. The Micah Reyes Center for Mathematical Excellence has a nice ring to it." The morning classes passed quickly, and at 10 o'clock, the entire school population filed into the auditorium. Micah, Carlos, and Emily found seats near the front, where they could see Dr. Harris standing on stage with several adults Micah didn't recognize. "Thank you all for coming," Dr. Harris began once everyone was settled. "Today I have the pleasure of announcing that Roosevelt Middle School has been selected as one of 5 schools nationwide to receive the Innovative Education Grant from the National STEM Foundation." A ripple of excitement moved through the audience. This grant, totaling $500,000, will fund a comprehensive program designed to identify and nurture talent in mathematics and science across diverse student populations. Dr. Harris gestured to the visitors on stage. "The selection committee is here today to present the award and to acknowledge the student whose story inspired this initiative." Micah felt a flush of heat rise to his face as every head in the auditorium seemed to turn toward him simultaneously. "Micah Reyes," Dr. Harris called, "would you please join us on stage?" His legs feeling suddenly wooden, Micah made his way to the steps leading up to the platform. Emily gave him an encouraging thumbs up, while Carlos mouthed, "Told you so." On stage, a woman in a tailored suit stepped forward with a ceremonial check and a plaque. "Micah," she said, her voice carrying through the microphone, "your courage in revealing your true abilities and your advocacy for educational equity captured our attention and inspired this grant program. The model you and your classmates have created with Equation for Change will now be implemented in schools across the country." The auditorium erupted in applause. As Micah accepted the plaque, he caught sight of a familiar face in the back of the hall, Professor Jameson, beaming with undisguised pride. Beside him stood Micah's parents, who had apparently been invited without his knowledge. His mother was wiping away tears while his father stood tall, applauding with unmistakable pride. "Would you like to say a few words?" Dr. Harris asked, gesturing to the microphone. Micah hadn't prepared anything, but as he looked out at the sea of faces, his classmates, his teachers, his friends, his family, the words came naturally. "When I solved that equation on Mr. Talbot's board, I wasn't trying to change anything. I accept my own situation," he began. "I just wanted to be seen for who I really was, after spending so long trying to be invisible." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What I've learned since then is that visibility isn't just about being noticed. It's about being recognized for your true self. And that kind of recognition can change everything, not just for one person, but for an entire community." Micah gestured to his fellow students. "Every one of you has potential that deserves to be recognized. Every one of you deserves the opportunity to shine in your own way. This grant isn't really about me. It's about creating a school where that's possible for everyone." As he returned to his seat amid renewed applause, Micah felt a sense of completion, as if a circle that began with that fateful equation was now closing, but opening countless new circles in the process. After the assembly, as students dispersed to their classes, Dr. Harris approached Micah in the hallway. "There's someone who would like to speak with you," she said, her expression unreadable. "In my office." Curious, Micah followed her. When they entered the office, he stopped short in surprise. Standing by the window, looking significantly thinner and somehow smaller than Micah remembered, was Mr. Talbot. "Hello, Micah," the former teacher said quietly. Dr. Harris closed the door gently. "Mr. Talbot asked to see you while he was in Portland. I told him it would be entirely your choice whether to meet with him or not." Micah hesitated, torn between the instinct to retreat and the realization that this conversation might represent an important closure. "It's okay," he said finally. "I'll talk with him." Dr. Harris nodded. "I'll be right outside if you need me." When they were alone, an awkward silence filled the room. Mr. Talbot cleared his throat. "I watched your TED Talk," he said finally. "Several times, actually." Micah waited, unsure how to respond. "You were right," Mr. Talbot continued. "About everything. The expectations, the bias, the limitations I placed on certain students." He met Micah's eyes directly. "I'm sorry for how I treated you." The apology was simple, but seemed genuine. Micah nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that. I'm teaching at a different school now," Mr. Talbot added, "and I'm trying to do better. Your talk made me see things I hadn't wanted to. Acknowledge about myself." "That's good," Micah said, meaning it. Another silence stretched between them, but this one felt less tense. A space for reflection rather than confrontation. "I underestimated you," Mr. Talbot said finally. "But I think I underestimated all my students in different ways. I was so focused on who I thought could succeed that I became blind to all the potential around me." Micah thought of his formula: potential plus opportunity, plus recognition, transformation. Perhaps Mr. Talbot was experiencing his own transformation. "People can change," Micah offered. "That's what Equation for Change is all about. Creating systems that allow everyone to grow even when they make mistakes." Mr. Talbot nodded thoughtfully. "You're quite a remarkable young man, Micah Reyes. I suspect we'll all be hearing much more from you in the years to come." As Micah left the office, he found his parents waiting with Professor Jameson. His mother embraced him immediately. "We're so proud of you," she whispered, "not just for the grant or the recognition, but for who you've become." That evening, the Reyes family hosted a small celebration at their home. Emily and Carlos came, along with Lily and several other members of Equation for Change. Professor Jameson attended briefly, bringing news that Princeton had expanded their summer program invitation to include 2 of Micah's friends if they were interested. "Really?" Carlos exclaimed. "We could all go?" "If your parents approve," Professor Jameson confirmed. "The committee was impressed by what you've accomplished with your FAE student organization." As the gathering continued, Micah slipped away briefly to the quiet of the backyard. The spring evening was perfect. Warm air scented with blooming flowers, the sky painted in soft purples and oranges as the sun began to set. Emily found him there, gazing up at the emerging stars. "Everything okay?" she asked, joining him on the porch steps. "Just thinking," Micah replied, "about how different everything is from the beginning of the year. Good different. Definitely good different." He smiled. "I never thought solving one equation could change so much." "It wasn't just the equation," Emily pointed out. "It was your decision to be yourself, no matter what. That's what started everything." Inside, they could hear laughter and conversation, Carlos telling an animated story, Lily's clear voice adding details. Micah's parents engaged in discussion with the other adults, a community that had formed around a single moment of courage. "Next year will be even better," Emily predicted. "The grant program, the Princeton summer, high school applications." She glanced at him. "Are you ready for all that?" Micah considered the question, thinking back to the boy who had walked into Mr. Talbot's classroom in September. Cautious, hidden, afraid to shine too brightly. That boy seemed like a distant memory now. "I'm ready," he said with quiet confidence. "Whatever comes next." As they rejoined the celebration inside, Micah carried with him the knowledge that he had solved far more than a mathematical equation that day in Mr. Talbot's classroom. He had solved the most important problem of all: how to be authentically himself in a world that sometimes made that difficult, and in doing so, he had helped others find their own solutions, creating a ripple effect that would continue long after the equation on the whiteboard had been erased. The formula he had offered in his TED Talk, potential plus opportunity plus recognition, transformation, wasn't just a clever metaphor. It was a truth he had lived, a reality he had helped create, and a legacy that would endure through Equation for Change and all the lives it touched. As he looked around at the faces of friends and family gathered in celebration, Micah realized that visibility, true visibility, wasn't about being seen by others. It was about seeing yourself clearly and having the courage to let that self shine.